Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Reducing Application Risk, What Technology Can and Can't Protect Against. Before we get started, I'd like to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's session. You've joined today's webinar listening through your computer's speaker system by default. However, if you'd like to call in using the phone, just locate the audio pane and select Use Telephone. The dial-in information and access code will then be displayed. All attendees are on mute, but if you could please ensure that your line is muted, it would be greatly appreciated. We encourage asking questions throughout today's session using the question pane. At the end of today's session, our presenter will take as many questions as we have time for. We'll also be live tweeting today's webinar using the hashtag #GetSecure, so feel free to follow along and share with your network. And last but not least, everyone will receive a copy of today's recording link via email. All right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce our presenter today, Mike Cooper. Mike started at Florida Tech in James Whitaker's Center for Information Assurance Lab, doing security development and pen testing, and ultimately had a hand in helping to jumpstart security innovation. He enjoys creating flexible solutions to help clients improve their security posture with the goal of serving as an eventual trusted advisor. All right, Mike, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. All right, so a little background on Security Innovation. Security Innovation is a company dedicated to helping our customers with hard application and data security problems. We've spent years researching vulnerabilities, why they occur, what they look like in production code, and how to find and fix them. This is really our passion. So over the years, we've analyzed more than 10,000 vulnerabilities in both the course of research studies and through assessments of software for our customers. We got our start as a security testing company, grew to a products and services company that focused on breaking systems, whether through code review or pen test or attack simulation, and then helping fix those problems through secure design and implementation. We acquired Intrusion in 2009 to expand our data protection services, focused on data in transit as well as data at rest, with best-in-class and high-performance cryptography. So let's first talk about how the network and an application can work with each other or against each other. So in the past, the focus for improving enterprise security has been on the perimeter. It was thought that if you were able to secure the network boundary, then you could secure the entire enterprise. And unfortunately, this is proven not to be the case. So securing the network boundary ignores two important factors. It ignores insider threats. So attacks from either trusted personnel or trusted machines inside your perimeter defenses. This doesn't always mean a trusted person has gone to the dark side. Insider threat could be malware brought behind the firewall by a laptop, a successful phishing email, or social engineering attack, so your employee is acting on the attacker's behalf without their knowledge. Some of my earliest heartburn moments involved worms like Natchi just relentlessly being brought into the trusted network by people who really should know better, so it definitely happens. Securing the network boundary also ignores the fact that attack payloads can be very hard to identify and block. So whether it's signature-based, behavior-based, anomaly-based, these monitoring for behavior type things seem like great ideas in the early days, and in practice we found that they can be very difficult to discern attacks where the entire system just appears to be functioning normally. So yes, the shipping department received an order that was filled, and it was sent out. And yes, the credit card processing department received a notice to charge back an order to a credit card. You mean that order wasn't for a return? They were the same order, so this negative quantity number is affecting the business process there. But you still can't ignore your network. Setting up a good perimeter defense and locking down your servers and hardening your configurations are all important steps. But when you're done with that, you still have application security risks to consider. So according to Gartner, a majority of known security vulnerabilities are in the application layer, not the network layer. A well-configured perimeter defense, including firewalls and intrusion detection systems, can block some external attacks from exploiting these vulnerabilities, but they can't block everything, and they can't block insider threats. So let's take a look at application behavior. So this is the intended behavior. This is the specification. This is what we want it to do. When the software is implemented, this is the actual behavior. This is what it does. So hopefully we get as much of that purple circle to line up with the translucent circle, but in practice we find that that rarely happens. The application is definitely doing this operation B given input A, but it's also doing these operations C and D and producing this output E. So traditional testing looks for the presence of or the functionality of the B. So these are traditional bugs. When you give input A, you're not getting output B. But most security bugs end up in this little crescent out on the side. So the outputs C, D, and E. So traditional testing is good at looking for those things that are supposed to be output, but not at detecting things that are not known problems. And that's where the nastiest problems typically are found, the creative ones. So either they're specific to your application, like a business logic attack, or ones that are atypical and have to be detected by manual efforts because you're looking for extra functionality, not stated functionality. So how do we understand the root cause for these application vulnerabilities? Sometimes it's as simple as organizational disconnect. You have platform teams managing platform changes, network changes going into effect, and application changes, and they all affect each other, and they're just, the teams aren't communicating properly. Sometimes you have security teams trying to bridge the gaps. They're conducting scans and they're sending problems back, but developers have to fix it. They don't necessarily know how to properly address it. And applications are definitely operating in a hostile environment. So there's all kinds of new problems. There's lots of misinformation out there as well. That doesn't help. So there's an abundance of bad information on the internet. I found a lot of bad advice, from turning very important security features off because something isn't working properly, to poorly implemented regular expressions shared on forums. But that doesn't mean things like textbooks and academic curricula aren't immune to these problems either. So a lot of these are still propagating bad patterns and oversimplified examples without explaining the full application security picture. But it's not just a coding problem. A poor deployment or buggy configuration can undermine even the most stringent development practices. It is largely an application problem in that applications and their environments often let users be abusers. So simply by just trusting the user and failing to properly segregate duties, at this point we should all know that a web application rarely needs administrative privileges in a database during 99% of the operations that it performs. And it only takes one mistake in one of those operations for an attacker to take advantage of those advanced privileges. So why not decrease the attack surface by only using elevated privileges for 1% of the operations that require it? So the truth is that all data and all applications and the operations they're performing, they are remarkable. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different components, pieces working together. And so applications typically access and manipulate data unencrypted. So they're going to pull the data in, maybe decrypt it if they can, do some operations on it, and then re-encrypt it and send it out. But they have to operate on the data in its unencrypted form at some point. Hackers can often use things like TLS and encryption to hide their attacks, though. So you can send traffic, but you can't actually see what's going on behind the scenes. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be using something like TLS to protect your traffic. It does help mitigate some risk, but it also shouldn't be relied on to eliminate all risk. So it's a point-to-point solution. It's not end-to-end. It encrypts data in transit, which can render some firewalls, intrusion detection systems, and other traffic inspection useless until or unless the TLS is terminated. And that's an important point to remember. It provides no protection from malicious input. Malicious input to the application is simply encrypted on its way to the application. It gets there and it's very secure on its way there. And it may not conceal truly confidential data. TLS inspection and proxy server termination are common on certain networks. And SSL can be terminated anywhere along the path of, say, a cloud infrastructure, where there's a load balancer, a CDN, maybe a third-party proxy providing other services. So it could be terminated anywhere along those points. Man-in-the-middle attacks also exist. We've also seen things like chain of trust issues, which has occurred. We've had compromised certificate authorities. So the low-hanging fruit are the first target for attackers. And they often use these to springboard and jump to other systems. So an easily compromised website makes a great mule for pushing out infected or pushing out malware and infecting users or anyone that visits that site. A compromised application can do double duty to hide from legitimate Google searches or requests, but still serves malware to targeted victims. And typically, automated attacks such as worms don't really have any sense of purpose of the server. They just see a potential victim. Sometimes they move along and see, can it infect this machine or not, and then moves along, maybe finds another list of hosts to infect along the way. So let's have a quick reality check on our assumptions about external threats being our largest threats. Like we said, typically we let the attacker through to the best targets, which are the applications. Web applications are easily accessible. Oftentimes you're exposing an application for anonymous access, and there's a low risk of being caught. There's browsers and the underlying protocols can often be accomplices, so you can force the client or the protocol itself to do something it wasn't intended for an attacker to gain an advantage. And so we have these web services now that are also being used across web applications, mobile applications, thick clients, cloud applications, and they're susceptible to some old issues, but also some new tricks. So you've got XPath injection, WSDL scanning, recursive payloads, SOAP with malicious attachments, and there's a real low cost of entry for all these things for attackers. So there's tools and browser extensions that are free, and there's obviously hacking tips that are readily available out on the web. So network defenses don't keep a determined hacker or attacker away. They can help, and we'll discuss that later, but it's definitely not going to solve the issue. So let's talk about what we can do at the network level in the case of cascading failures leading to an epic and newsworthy security hack. So secure communication technologies help you keep your data secure in transit. VPNs let your applications and components interact securely, whether located in your data center, a client, or a partner's data center, or out in the cloud. Firewalls at the most basic level act like fences with gates. Some gates might be propped open and allow everyone through. Some gates might be locked and you can only get in with a key. Others might have a guard that asks for identification before letting you through. And then the most secure gates have teams of inspectors that line the pathway, and they watch your every move as you're going through. Intrusion detection and prevention systems act kind of like guards stationed in towers at various strategic points throughout the network. So some guards have megaphones, and when they see something, they alert everyone. Other guards are sharpshooters, and they can actually stop the malicious behavior when it's spotted. As the name implies, a VPN aids private communication across a potentially widely distributed and untrusted network. VPNs can encrypt just the data, so we just have data going between a set of machines, and what they're talking about is secret. Or we can encrypt the traffic itself and the data. So not only do we not see the data, but we don't know who's sending data to who. VPNs can be deployed with dedicated hardware, dedicated software, or a hybrid solution somewhere in between. So hardware-based VPNs are typically dedicated appliances that provide just VPN capabilities. They usually provide the highest network throughput, but they might not be as flexible or easily deployed as software-based solutions. They're often the most expensive, but they can work best when deployed consistently. So whether within your own organization or across multiple organizations, if you know you're using the same hardware, configuration and security should be a little bit higher, a little bit easier to deploy. Firewall-based VPNs are kind of hybrids that they use a bunch of different networking techniques to secure communications between endpoints. Some parts are hardware networking, some parts are software networking, but when they combine, they function at the firewall level to support confidentiality and properly authenticate and authorize communications. Software-based VPNs, such as OpenVPN, may be ideal when both endpoints of the VPN are not controlled by the same organization, and also if performance requirements are modest. So the hardware won't match at both endpoints. Software can be widely configured to bridge the two different systems. They're generally harder to manage than hardware-based solutions, and they require familiarity with potentially several different parts. So the host operating system, the application itself, and the intricacies of supporting many different options and configurations. Like I mentioned earlier, firewalls are like a fence, or better yet, a well-fortified castle with a drawbridge. This isn't impenetrable, but it's effective at funneling traffic to specific access points. So one of the first steps when assessing a castle, if you're going to be an attacker or a network from the outside, is to find out where the drawbridges are and plan the attack from there. So you can essentially focus on the areas like the drawbridge, but you're going to, on the defensive side, hope that you've got enough protection measures because those will be focus points. So the most secure castle would have no bridge, no drawbridge at all, but it also wouldn't be very useful. Each drawbridge that you add and build requires more guards to be gatekeepers, more infrastructure to lift up the drawbridge and have the gate and the arch, and then the staff to open and close that. So if you're going to open up your outer defenses, you might be allowing them access to specific areas. So let's say your web server. So in the castle analogy, that's the courtyard. So you have large crowds of people coming into the courtyard, but you still have some segregated areas. Now your guards need to watch the outside walls to look for those attackers on the outside, but they also need some guards looking inside to monitor the courtyard. So every service you allow, the more people you allow in, the more specialized guards you need, and the more guards you need looking. So let's just take a quick example, take a look at what a computer running Windows without a firewall looks like. So if we run a port scan on this machine, we're going to see a list of open ports, including port 135 for location and remote procedure call services, port 3389 for Microsoft Terminal Service, remote desktop, and port 1025 for file publishing services. So an attacker can use this information to target the services, and they can see potentially what version is running. They certainly know that if this is a Windows machine, it could be running these types of software, and they're going to look for known exploits to get into the system. So how does this affect a securely developed application or securely deployed application? So it's very likely that most of these services do not need to be exposed and only really serve to increase the attack surface of the entire system. So if this is a web server, you really just want the web port exposed, and you don't want to expose any of these other ports. You're just increasing your attack surface. So we're talking about firewalls. How do the firewall rules work? There are many firewall implementations. They each have their own syntax, but they're largely the same. You have some. I have some simple examples to help illustrate how they work, which can help understand the strengths and limitations. So here we have a command, and on BSD systems, the IP firewall or IPFW command can be used to add a rule, and it's pretty simple. So we look at this rule, and we are adding a rule to deny TCP traffic from the host cracker.evil.org to the host wolf.tambob.su on the telnet port. So doing the same thing on different systems will look different, but it largely operates the same way. We can do this to allow traffic from host to host. We can allow set it to deny traffic from certain hosts. We can open certain ports to certain specific hosts or at certain times of the day. So it's pretty flexible, but you do have those limitations as to traffic and what you see on the network. So why have a firewall at all if we're letting everyone through? The firewall does nothing for the attack coming in on port 80 in this instance. So the compromise could be an exploit for the web server software, such as IIS. It could be an exploit for a backend component that's being exposed, so a DBMS, or maybe the application framework, such as PHP, or the web application code itself. The result, though, is that command or code injection is being allowed, and it lets the attacker use the system to attempt to make an outbound connection. So in this case, they're trying to get out on port 23. Blocking the outgoing connection reduces the options that the attacker has. Though clearly the vulnerability could be used by the system or by the attacker in other ways, probably do other bad things. In this case, the firewall is preventing for whatever reason, why the attacker is trying to get out, and that's limiting their options. So the firewalls are a good first-line defense, but they're not a complete security solution. It limits exposure to the applications and services that you want to expose, but it doesn't have context into what data is sent to the application. So it can't prevent an application or a system that's configured improperly. It won't prevent forceful browsing. It doesn't have really insight into input validation attacks. It doesn't really know about HTTP sessions and how those are hijacked. It can't spot impersonation attacks and any other application, framework, host, or network vulnerabilities. So although they have limitations, we still don't ever want to deploy without one. You'll be constantly under attack. At one point in time, the mean time between connecting a Windows 2000 server or Windows 2003 server to the internet and getting infected with a worm was less than 4 minutes. It wasn't even enough time to download the patch. So let's visualize how some data goes through a firewall. So this piece of hexadecimal data is allowed through the firewall on port 80. Is it text? If so, what encoding is it? Is it part of an image, a PNG, a JPEG? In fact, this data, when loaded in a certain version of Flash, exploited a buffer overflow and allowed arbitrary code execution of the attacker's choosing. So this attack string, unless recognized, just goes right through. So how can we prevent that? The answer to that is a web application firewall. So a web application firewall monitors the HTTP traffic and uses policy to detect and prevent malicious behavior in the web applications. It can mitigate an attack vector, such as cross-site scripting or SQL injection, by blocking either malicious client requests or suspicious responses from the server. And that would be all performed according to rule sets. So it doesn't remediate the underlying vulnerability, though, so the actual vulnerability may be exploited by a different attack vector. So whether that's a variant of the attack that is missed by the web application firewall, because rule sets can be wrong or have bugs too. Again, we talk about insider threat, a client that is either behind or whitelisted by the web application firewall. So an insider threat, malware, phishing, social engineering, stacking vulnerabilities. So if in another part of the application there's an open redirect that we can be used to attack the application, we're bypassing the web application firewall. Or pivoting, so a vulnerability in another component, such as a misconfigured proxy service, or maybe even accidental or direct exposure without protection of the web application firewall. So it's a great example of defense in depth. It very well could prevent a compromise, or at least alert you to the existence of an unknown vulnerability or attack vector, but it's not a replacement for fixing the issue. But it can reduce your exposure while you're waiting for a vendor patch, some other network implementation that helps resolve the issue, or internal dev team. So intrusion detection systems monitor behavior under normal and secure conditions, and then try and detect an attack based on the extent of deviation from normal behavior. They're generally located in the DMZ or tightly integrated with the system or systems that are being monitored. It's much more useful for them to be able to see all traffic, to see what's going on. So they often must be tuned for custom applications. They might have predefined configurations for common off-the-shelf solutions, so you can just enable those. But if you're doing this for your own application, your internal developed application, you might have some tuning and development to do. A network-based intrusion detection system resides on the target network and listens to all the traffic on the system. It may have throughput limitations because it's looking at and validating all the traffic on that network segment. It can detect intrusions, and it basically keeps track of network traffic under normal conditions, and then fingerprints that. So it looks and recognizes anomalies that go outside of that normal behavior. So an example of this would be using Snort. A host-based IDS resides on the host, so it uses CPU and disk cycles, but it can also provide real-time alerts. So there's some drawbacks, but it gives you that real-time view. It records CPU, memory, and disk space activities on the host machine, maybe keep track of files on the system which are active and where they're being read from and written to. During an intrusion, if the attacker tries to read or write to files that are not normally accessed, the IDS, the host-based IDS, can detect and possibly prevent that. A log-based IDS is essentially more of a forensics tool after an intrusion. If a network-based or a host-based intrusion detection system alerts you, you can use syslog or SNMP log-based tools to figure out what happened during the attack. And target monitoring, a target monitoring IDS resides on the box and watches the OS and files. So it doesn't actively search for anomalies or misuse of those pieces, but it instead looks for modification of specified files. It can be run automatically based on a schedule, or it can be operating in real time, just depending on the performance requirements. Like the other tools we've discussed, IDSs have limitations as well. So they need to be monitored, and they require tuning to adjust their sensitivity, because an IDS should be sensitive enough to detect an attack, but not too sensitive. False IDS emergencies frustrate system administrators, and they might just end up ignoring the IDS completely, which isn't helping anyone. In addition, deploying a large number of heterogeneous network appliances, IDSs, firewalls, and IPSs at the same time makes it difficult to monitor all these systems and create coherent unified reports as the system complexity gets higher and higher. So now let's discuss what can be done to further reduce the attack surface so that in the event of a compromise, there's less opportunity for an attacker to increase their leverage on the system. So here we'll talk about hardening and lockdown tools you can use to improve the security of your server. So there's tools that allow for rapid and widespread deployment of patches. You can use vulnerability assessment tools to help find and fix vulnerabilities on the network. Antivirus technologies use scanners to detect known and unencrypted viruses by analyzing signatures, and unknown viruses through heuristics. Integrity checkers monitor system changes and alert the user when certain changes occur. Access control technologies allow you to restrict access to sensitive physical locations and software systems, respectively. Runtime application self-protection, or RASP, helps detect anomalous application behavior and can help mitigate an attack vector. So let's face it, patch management is hard. Finding what patches are available and for what issues is only half the battle. Sometimes a patch will break something and require either risk acceptance if the patch can't be deployed, or the search must continue for other mitigations if that can't be put in place. So can you use the network to set a whitelist so only a few hosts can even connect to the service for a time being, just to reduce your attack surface there until a fix can be put in place, or maybe a new patch is released. These tools can help find, manage, deploy, and in some cases roll back patches for the OS, network services, application environments, supporting libraries, and other components as well, database systems, things like that. Hardening tools help you identify potential areas where you can mitigate some risk, and they often can help you make the changes to the system to harden the system. They often must be run on the system themselves and require administrative privileges. So for example, go through and figure out what's running on the server, what versions, and then going through and disabling version banners for network services. So going through and making it so when the service is running on the network, it doesn't advertise that it's running this exact version of the software. And it's every little bit helps. So some worms might, or even exploit tools, just jump from one host to a host based on a version number alone. So reducing that just a little bit can even help. And there's several of these tools available that'll help. Vulnerability assessment and remediation tools, they're often used remotely to determine what systems are out there, what services are running, and what could be potential vulnerabilities for those services. And it depends on what's running on port 80. Is this a Windows machine? Is it running IIS? Is it running Apache? Is there a fix or a mitigation for that issue? And then it allows you to continually assess that. Okay, so now you have the latest patch sets out there, you know what's out there, what versions, and you can keep maintaining that view into your environment. So antivirus at this point is pretty well known, and it does pretty well at detecting known threats from running and damaging a system. They can be used alongside integrity checkers, and they often target specific and known malware. So something is been identified out in the field, and then it allows an organization, especially a large organization, to address that threat far and wide. So scanners using a twofold method of protection, using both file scanning and background checking, will help you expand what you're looking at. So by analyzing virus signatures, you can detect known viruses, but unknown viruses can also be detected by monitoring activity. But there's often more false alarms by doing that. You can speed that up by using some heuristics, so you're only scanning executable files for viruses and boot sectors for boot viruses. So you're not looking for in areas where you're not going to find those types of attacks. You can use specialized algorithms that only look at chunks of the file that, like say the PE header if you're talking about something, or maybe a specific target of a different type of executable or compressed file. You can use point systems to raise an alarm, and disinfectors are also usually built into any good scanner. So you can remove a virus from the file but leave it, but it might not be able to do that without damaging the file. So at the last ditch effort, you can quarantine the file so that way no one accesses the infected file. So most viruses maintain an infection on a system by making changes to it. Integrity checkers detect, and some can prevent changes by recording a signature for all the important resources, and then used for checking host integrity, monitoring configuration changes, and therefore detecting system break-ins. They often don't work that effectively when used without a good scanner. But a lot of times scanners that incorporate their own checkers don't implement the best checkers. So again, defense in depth using more than one solution depending on your need. So we also want to talk about minimizing both physical and technical access controls. So minimize the access physically to the data as much as possible in the real world and virtually. You want to make sure that you have things like perimeter security, door locks. Depending on the sensitivity of the data, you might have security guards, biometric controls, cameras, advanced sensors and alarms, and obviously technical controls, passwords, smart cards, utilization of encryption, and obviously you're going to be doing authentication and then consistent authorization throughout. Runtime application self-protection, it's implemented within the application itself or around the application in the environment. And it functions largely like a web application firewall does to detect and prevent attacks. It has a lot more insight because OWAF really only looks at the traffic, and so it has that one single input stream. Whereas RASP can be applied to all the different input streams for an application. So libraries, file, network, registry if it's a Windows application, things like that. And they can be applied to all application types. And RASP can also be applied to web applications. They give you a lot of insight into the application logic, its configuration, and the state of the application allows it to be very, very accurate. So it considers a behavior, but also the surrounding context of that behavior. And it's able to inspect all the input sources, so API calls, and even encrypted network protocols before they're encrypted or after they're decrypted. It also enables self-protected data, so security constraints that are bound to the data throughout its entire life cycle and travel with it. There are some limitations. Again, it must be tuned to application behavior. It's very close to the application, and it may have a negative effect on performance. It's looking at a lot of different things, but it will mitigate an attack vector, so a specific attack to the application, but it doesn't remediate the underlying vulnerability, again, like a web application firewall. So how do we start to turn the tables? Getting on the defensive is the next step, though in many cases it should actually be the first step. So this diagram does a good job of showing how security engineering activities can be layered into a normal software development process. Whether you use waterfall or agile, you probably already perform many of the core activities that are shown in the diagram. And to add security engineering, you simply add security activities at the appropriate times. For instance, when you normally determine your functional requirements, you'd also determine your security objectives. When you would normally apply design best practices, you'd be applying secure design best practices as well. Security engineering does not require that you change or replace your existing process, but just augment it with a set of high-impact security activities. So how do we think like an attacker to do that? We want to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. So you want to think in terms of attacks, threats, and risks, not necessarily the vulnerabilities. So we threat model every day, or almost every day, and maybe not realize it. But secure software applications start by thinking about threats. So threats are not vulnerabilities. Threats live forever. They are the attacker's goal. The attacker's goal is to get at this specific piece of data. How they get there is the vulnerability. If done right, a threat model provides more leverage than any other security activity. It really is the basis for pretty much all our testing activities, all the knowledge activities that we do. We always start with a threat model, and we even build it out and continue it throughout the life cycle. A risk-based approach is focused on categorizing and prioritizing assets that you want to protect. So all your activities are focused on protection of these assets and the reduction of risk to those assets. Focusing on your risks first allows you to prioritize your security investments. For instance, you should not spend as much of your time and effort on a low-risk application as you should on a high-risk application. This is intuitively obvious, but if you don't rank your applications first, then you will tend to apply your security efforts suboptimally. Even when looking at a single application, you can prioritize the risks that are relevant to the application and invest appropriately on policies, procedures, tools, and training to reduce the highest probability and the highest impact risks first. One measure of the maturity of your application security efforts is how well you apply a risk-based approach. The most mature application security programs are highly risk-focused and use ongoing metrics to measure their effectiveness, implement mitigating controls, and tune security investments. Applications can be categorized according to potential business impact if the application was attacked, and this is usually a measure of the data and service criticality. Potential security threats that could be leveraged against the application, and this is usually a measure of attack surface or exposure. So a key output of a risk ranking activity is a set of application security policies that can be applied to each category of applications. For instance, not all applications need to implement all activities in a secure SDLC, including deep security assessments. Many non-critical applications need nothing more than an automated scan to find some common vulnerabilities or meet some compliance requirements. Your system's attack surface represents the number of entry points you expose to the potential attacker. The fewer entry points, the less chance an attacker finding a vulnerability in your code. No matter how hard you work to improve the security of your software, it is a fact that vulnerabilities, known and unknown, will still exist in your software. Attack surface reduction is an exercise in risk reduction. The lower your attack surface, the less chance of a high impact exploit in your system. So, reducing your network attack surface. If a set of ports only needs to communicate between a known set of machines, you can lock that down to help limit the exposure of those ports. So even if an application could be verifiably 100% vulnerability free, you could still completely be undermined by an unmitigated vulnerability in the application runtime environment it's sitting on, the host or OS that's running that environment, or the network and the services that are running on that. So you want to limit access as granularly as possible to limit access to your ports, protocols, applications, services, interfaces, devices, and network segments. It prevents a compromised component from pivoting, like we discussed earlier, or using another component when all unnecessary access is denied by default. So if a set of ports only needs to communicate between those machines, it's much like need to know. So you're limiting the exposure to the resources that need access to them. So wrapping up. The key that I've been going on about all this is the defense in depth. Software applications are definitely the primary target of attack. You need to know your key threats because those are the threats that will bring your organization to its knees. So you need to understand the threats to the risk and how you can address those. You're going to risk rank your applications to make sure that you're not operating blindly. Spending your dollars on a very small marketing app when you have an exposed HR application is operating blindly. You're going to identify the attacks that a hacker can conduct to elude network perimeter protections. So you're going to do some threat modeling, figure this out, and then look at all the different avenues. Maybe you can reduce that attack surface. You want to educate key team members. So have your architects look at design principles and secure frameworks. Work with your developers on secure coding basics. You want to start with the OWASP top 10. And then your testers, or QA testers, system integration testers, on how to think like an attacker. You need to understand how the application functions in your deployed environment to really assess the risk. So understanding throughout the stack what the application does, how it communicates, where it gets its data from, and how it presents that data to the user and how the user gets it. Those are all different facets of areas where you can implement potential network controls or other technical controls. So how can security innovation help with this? We have instructor-led and computer-based training. We've got over 100 courses for all of the major roles, so developers, testers, architects, managers, across a number of technologies and platforms. So .NET, ASP.NET, all kinds of different platforms, PHP. We've got hardening information for on how the security tools and technologies work. Our services team performs application and IT security assessments, and we have a zero false positive guarantee. And we give contextual remediation guidance. So we work with you to give you remediation advice that you can follow to mitigate the risk, no matter what your risk acceptance of that issue is. We also have our command and control application and mobile hackathons. So you have essentially a fun environment to learn about these different issues. You can see application security attacks and what the effects are, but it's also in a gamified way. So we have 300 plus vulnerabilities across a number of applications that you can use to assess your own security skills, or also just put your team to the test. So thank you again for attending today's session. A copy of the recording will be emailed to all attendees. In the meantime, check out all of our on-demand webinars at securityinnovation.com/webinars, or register for one of our upcoming command and control peek and play sessions. You can see if your teams have what it takes to hack our vulnerable websites while learning to protect your enterprise web application. This 30-minute session will give you a peek into command and control, our hackathon, and then we invite you to play for 24 hours after so you can test it out for yourself. Of course, if you have any other questions, please feel free to email us at getsecure@securityinnovation.com. Thank you.